den rechten Teil an der Nordseite.
Moving forward.
I'm talking about Munich as a case study. The issue is governing mobilities. That's an issue which is part of my research since many years, more than 20 years so far. The reason why I'm doing that is because I think learning from some case studies about how actors, how stakeholders are working together by finding new solutions, new ways, new strategies to deal with sustainable mobility or to deal with the unintended consequences of mobility and transport is something we need to learn more about. For me, Munich is a very important case study for how to govern mobility in the mobile risk society. The risk society is a concept that I'm working on for many, many years. Sustainable mobility is not only a question of finding the right concepts, finding the right policies, the right strategies. It's also an issue of finding the right way of working together, of collaborating on problem issues and on finding ways to deal with the consequences of mobility, of a mobile lifestyle, of mobile lives in that world, in there we live today. The major issue is actually how can we increase the level of reflexivity in the mobile risk society, in urban environments, in cities. How can we reflect about the consequences, about the historical developments, about the future of mobility in a proactive way, so that we are actually find ways of how to develop mobility and transport or mobilities into a desirable future, into a future where we think that it's good to live in, it's good to be there and to not to threaten the future of the generations which are coming after us. So what I'm doing now is I'm telling a sort of, I call it an urban narrative. It's a story about Munich, and it's about how the last 20 years have been working in the city in a southern city, capital city in southern Germany. One of the historical momentums in that story is that in 1993 a new Lord Mayor was elected in the city of Munich. At this time, mobility and transport has been something which well, I would call it like there was a social explosivity in that issue of transport and mobility, which was kind of explosive for the whole social structure of the city. One of the major issues, the discussions, the discourses at this time was about building new tunnels in the city of Munich. Building, let's say, moving on with the car-dependent city, moving on with increasing infrastructures, increasing capacities for car traffic in the city of Munich. And that was a really heavy and kind of nearly violent fight in the urban society of Munich. This happened in a situation in the 1980s and the early 1990s in Munich, where cooperation between the city of Munich, the planning departments, the different departments of the city, the industry, the civil society was actually nearly impossible. So nobody was actually able to sit around the same table and to think about what kind of solutions we can find for increasing mobility, increasing traffic in the city of Munich. And then suddenly there came up something what one of the the advisors of the new Lord Mayor said, we should think about to get the enemies on board and row a little bit slower with that. Not to go into the well-known and so far successful strategies, but to think about how we can change actually the way of working together and bringing new ideas, new innovations into the what mobility policies have been at this time. What they did, and this is actually part of the argument, because I started by saying we need to think about how to increase the level of reflexivity, is that the city of Munich, together with the BMW group, you know that BMW is the most important car, one of the most important car producers in Germany, but it's located in Munich, and it has its headquarters in Munich. So it's one of the powerful players in the city of Munich, and they've been deciding together to go to a remote place somewhere in the mountains, which is called Inzell, and this was actually a sort of turning point for the whole governance structure in the city of Munich, because BMW, the city of Munich, together with the trade unions, together with the public transport providers and many other, a number of more than 20 different stakeholders, went to that place, and they did together what they called a future workshop. Let's think about the future of mobility and transport in the city of Munich. What came out of that is, on the first hand, is an institutional, or a new institution, which is called the Inzell Initiative. The Inzell Initiative is still alive, it's still working, it's still one of the major deliberative institutions in the city of Munich. And what also came out of that is 11 principles for spatial planning and mobility in Munich. 11 principles which have kind of restructured and reframed the discourse on mobility and transport in the city of Munich, and which is important still today. It's always a reference point when a new plan is made, to think about, does it fit to these 11 principles which have been developed in 1995. So what I'm saying is that what came up is a new post-confrontative situation, actually, a new situation where collaboration and collaborative planning was the new paradigm of making transport and mobility policies in the city of Munich. This new post-confrontative setting and this post-confrontative interaction structure amongst the stakeholders in Munich has generated a few results. Significant new policies came out of that. One thing is that a long discussion in the city of Munich actually ended in this Inzell initiative by developing a new parking scheme for cars in the city center. It has been a heavy fight about to let the cars into the city and how to deal with that. And it took many years until the end of the 90s to find a solution for that. But it was actually possible in this new collaboration structure. The other thing is that one of the, I'm just mentioning a few aspects of that, is that something like corporate mobility management has become some kind of new frame for dealing with the consequences of mobility, and it has become one of the major issues in mobility, well, from the planning department, very much promoted in the planning department and other departments in the city of Munich. It's became promoted by that. Not a direct outcome of that, but it's in connection with that, is that in the later years, so in the recent years, actually, Munich started to make a new bicycle campaign. The bicycle share in Munich has been increasing from 14% to about 20% during the last years, and it's increasingly, or it's about to increase further on. So that's all things that actually have to do with that. And the very recent development in that new governance structure is that the members of the Insel initiative have been starting thinking about the future of mobility. So how can the mobility in the city of Munich look like in, let's say, 2050? What they did, they developed a Vision 2050 of mobility and transport in Munich. And there happened a few years ago a workshop where they tried to bring together all the different ideas about how to shape and to structure the future of mobility. And the Munich-based company, the Innovationsmanufaktur, they made a picture out of that. They mapped out all these different ideas on the regional scale of the region of Munich. And they, in that workshop, they started to develop a structure which says planning and organization, structures, infrastructures, and new mobility concepts. And they mapped out really a lot of different ideas which are currently in the air and how the future of mobility can look like. What we need to say on that is that I think the whole development which started in 1995 until today made it possible that all these different stakeholders from the city of Munich and the Chamber of Commerce and the industry and civil society groups, they've been working together on that vision, and I think it's a big achievement to come to that point and which is kind of symbolizing a social and also a cultural change in the interaction of these actors. It documents that there is a new mobility of ideas, which are ideas, new concepts are traveling through that space of possibilities to shape and to govern mobility in the future. But what is also important to say is that that this is so far, if we look on that map, it's like a to-do list for politicians, for urban planners and the industry. All these projects and concepts that are mentioned in that map are more or less already there, or all more or less in the air. So that means things like mobility cards, seamless mobility, mobile ticketing, new forms of data management, intelligent transport systems, and so far is already there. But what is actually missing in that perspective is a kind of what I call the subject-oriented perspective. So where are well, in a more economic language, I would say, where is the end user in that? So where do we think about what is the mobility practice of people and what is the specific needs of people to shape and to form and to organize their mobility in that urban system, in that urban space. One of the problems, I think, is that what has happened there is a kind of stabilizing and institutionalizing of an expert discourse, which is somehow decoupled from people's needs, people's situation, the citizens as such, or the users of mobility systems, and in the end, their social realities and everyday mobility practices. And I think that brings me actually to the beginning of what my talk is. How can we increase this level of reflexivity, and how can we increase let's say, the embeddedness of these processes of thinking about the future of mobility to society, and how can we link that together? And I've brought you a short video from a Munich artist, Mark Weiss. And in that video, actually it's not only one artist, it's a group of two, they called M+M. And what they do is they have a nice idea about a reflexive loop. In that video, these two artists, they show that people are driving on a motorway and then they are entering this kind of reflexive loop, and from that reflexive loop they can decide by themselves when they go out again back to that main road of the highway, and probably they have the opportunity to decide if they stay on that road or if they take the next exit to change into a new direction. And I think this is what we can learn from the story that I've been trying to tell you, is that these reflexive loops or these possibilities to think out of the box, they can change mobility discourses and they can change the structure of how we think about the future of mobility.
Seite sowie den Außenbereich den rechten.